time for us to check back in with the family history and stories of Opal Corn Myers. If you missed any of the previous readings, just look in the description below for a playlist, and you can also find the link there in the description to buy this wonderful, wonderful book. 4th through 6th grades, 1921 through 1924, playing in the Franklin house. We all had a considerable amount of work to get done, but as all young'uns do, we always found time to play. Miss Martson would let us girls play in the old Franklin house, which was used to store clothing and other donations. It had not been used as a bunkhouse since Frank Turner got a scholarship and went off to high school in 1915 or 1916. Miss Martson gave us only one condition. We were not to allow any boys to come in when we were playing inside. One time, several of us girls were in there looking for anything that we could use for playing house. I was standing close to the door when a boy tried to come in. I told him boys were not allowed, but he still tried to push his way in. Miss Martson said that you couldn't come in here, I announced with authority. I don't care. I'm coming in anyway. Well, all I can say is that I warned him twice, then I hit him in the head with a syrup bucket filled with pieces of broken plates. I mean to tell you, I just turned around and slung that bucket at his face. Miss Martson had told us, no boys, don't you let them come in. We meant to do just what she said, and that boy had a face to prove it. He had big patches of cuts all over his face after that incident. Miss Martson never said a word about me hitting him. Could be that he never told her what happened. Sunday afternoons at Grandma's house. Every Sunday after church, we would all go down to Grandma and Grandpa Corn's place for dinner. It was just like it is at my house now. Anyone who wanted to come could. Everyone was treated like family. Whether they were or not, it didn't matter much. I grew up thinking I had a much larger family than I really did. We would start the cooking and baking on Saturday. Sometimes we would go down to Grandma's to cook, and sometimes we would cook at our house and take food down there. Most people who came brought something for the meal. Some didn't. If there was a preacher down at Sand Hill, Papa would bring him. Preachers from anywhere always knew they were welcome. All the girls from up the hollow would come with us. There were 2 Click girls, 2 Meyer girls, and Cletus came with us one time. All of them were teenagers, close to Maggie's age. They were getting to that age where they just wanted to sit around on the porch and look at magazines or swing in the swings. If they felt like getting out and doing something, they would usually walk down and sit by the spring, if you could call that doing something. There weren't many girls my age. I was younger, but I preferred playing with the boys anyway. Every once in a while, the girls would go with us up on the hill and play stink base, but there was just no way that they would ride the calves with us. When we played stink base at school, most of the time we'd play girls against boys because it was easier to keep up with and know who was on your side. A lot of times when you were playing, you'd get so excited you'd almost catch yourself, you know. Stink base was one of our favorite games, but in no way did it compare to riding Grandpa Corn's steers with the boys. There would be George and Clark Ellison, John and Ben Myers, the 2 Click boys, Harrison, Roy, and Nathan Corn, Uncle Jesse's boys, Clyde Pack, Burl and me, and others would come from time to time. We would ride calves all Sunday evening. We just loved riding the steers. Guess the only way you could tell me from the boys was that I had to wear a dress. The skirts were full then and about mid-calf in length, but they certainly didn't stop me from getting up on a calf as fast as any boy. Teasing the bull. We had one mad bull up on the hill that we enjoyed teasing. We'd been told that anything red would make bulls furious, and we were not satisfied until we had found the brightest red piece of material we could. Every Sunday we would go up there and shake that red cloth right in front of that old bull. It didn't take all that long to get his attention. When he charged us, we would take off running around behind the cedar tree and climb up in the apple tree to hide before he got there. That bull never did look up, so he couldn't see us in the apple tree. He thought that we were behind that cedar tree somewhere. He would keep butting that cedar over and over until he forgot why he was doing that in the first place. We would laugh about how dumb the bull was. Papa got real upset with that bull for ruining his cedar tree. It had been a right pretty tree until that dumb bull butted it all to pieces. Of course, we never did let Papa know why that happened to his pretty cedar. Don't know for sure what Papa would have done if he knew we had caused all that damage. I was pretty good at playing games, and I could usually beat the boys because I could outrun most of them. Sometimes we played less active games like marbles. We actually played marbles a lot. We called it roly-hole. Children don't play marbles much anymore. Playing house. The other girls liked to play house and dolls more than I did. Once in a while I'd play house with the girls, but even then, lots of times the boys would play with us too. We would make playhouses and furnish them with old dishes and glasses or whatever we could find. The older children would be the parents, and the younger ones would be their children. We had different families, and each family had to make their own house. Maggie and Leonard would be the mama and papa of one family. Ed and I would be their children. Burl and Ethel would be the mama and papa of another family, with Audie and the others as their children. In the early spring, if the hog house wasn't being used, we'd get lots of water and scrub it out real good, and that would be one of our houses. When we'd all go to the Turners to play, our house would be in their barn. We play like that sometimes for weeks at a time. Swinging on vines. We also liked to run and play around in the woods. We were all the time chewing the leaves of a plant we called mountain tea. It didn't grow very tall, but it was just as green as could be. All of us would put a few of the leaves in our mouths and chew them. It tasted like tea-berry gum. We swallowed the juice and then spit out the leaves, trying to imitate the way men and some of the women would spit out their tobacco juice. We did a lot of things that would seem pretty strange to kids now. We'd chew on the inner birch bark. Why, that birch sap tasted real good. We even used to chop big old places in birch trees and then get down and lick the sap. We liked chestnut sap too. One time Papa was building a fence rail out of chestnut logs. After he cut the logs to the size he wanted them, Burl and I would peel off the bark on one side, and then we'd crawl down and lick all the sap off. When we finished with that side, we'd then turn the log, peel the other side, and lick that one. When we played up in the woods, we would make jump ropes out of grapevines. Two of us would hold the ends and swing the vine, and the others would jump. When you missed, you would have to hold the vine. Sometimes when the vine hit you just right, it would knock your feet right out from under you. Whenever we found a strong vine, we would cut one end loose and grab onto the end hanging from the tree and swing. Sometimes our weight would pull the vine right out of the tree and we would land on our bottoms. Of course, our favorite way to swing was out over the edge of a steep bank. This was a lot more fun than swinging in a flat place. Sometimes we would swing out over a bank where we would actually be at the tops of the trees in the valley below us. We loved doing that. We never did think about just how dangerous that could be, but naturally, our papas did, and they didn't like us doing that at all. They would warn us about swinging out over the banks or across gullies, but they never did find out who was doing the swinging. Whenever Papa or one of the neighbors found a swinging vine, they would cut it off. They couldn't seem to stop us, and they were afraid that we'd get killed. It's a wonder someone didn't. Papa had fixed us rope swings in some of the trees around our house. He had even tied planks to the rope so we could sit and swing. Maggie and some of the girls liked that, but we thought it was pretty dull. I wasn't your typical girly type. I never had many dolls. In fact, I don't remember having but one store-bought doll until I was a big girl. Mama made us some dolls stuffed with sawdust, and I enjoyed fooling with those, but come to think of it, the only time I did that was during the winter when the weather was too bad to play outside. I liked other games a lot more. I guess I got used to being around Burl and Jesse's boys and liked them better. Working at Grandpa Corn's. During the summer, Burl and I spent nearly all our time during the day working down at Grandpa Corn's. Grandpa would put us to work out in the cornfield, Burl on one side of the field and me on the other. We were to each hoe down the row until we met in the middle. To aggravate me, Burl would stop hoeing about 3 or 4 hills short of the middle, and then when I would fuss about it, he would say, "Now you know them hills is yours." "They're not mine either," I defended myself. "This one right here is the middle, so you had best be getting yourself busy and hoe to your side of this hill." We get into a lot of silly arguments like that. Then Grandpa Corn would get after us and sometimes make us go all the way back and hoe the other one's row of corn. I don't know what made us do that. I guess we just like to do it for the pure mischief of it, or maybe to see what Grandpa or the other one would do. Sometimes Grandpa would give us each a section of the cornfield to hoe by ourselves. I would work fast to get my part finished so I could lay down at the end of my last row and go to sleep while I was waiting for the rest of them to finish up. Sometimes we worked so much at Grandpa's that it seemed like we only went home to sleep. Watching Aunt Winnie's boy. Quite often my job at Grandma's was to watch Estes, Aunt Winnie's boy, so she could help out in the fields. Estes was almost 7 years old, but he couldn't walk. Most of those in the family thought that Estes was damaged at birth. You see, when Winnie was pregnant and close to her time for giving birth, Uncle Hugh was worried about her being at home alone with Swanee while he was out working in the fields. He came up with the idea of using the shotgun as a signal. He told Aunt Winnie, "If your time comes when I'm out in the field and you're ready for the midwife to come, I want you to go outside and shoot the shotgun as a signal." So when Aunt Winnie started labor, she did exactly that. Winnie had twins, Estes and Lestus. Lestus was either stillborn or died minutes after he was born, and Estes was born with a nervous condition. As a baby, Estes was so nervous and skittish that you could put a feather down in the doorway and he wouldn't crawl over it. He'd stay there in the house all day. He was scared of everything. No one knew, but they all suspected that her shooting that shotgun had caused it. I know that it wore Aunt Winnie out trying to keep up with him, and she looked forward to coming over to work at Grandpa's during the busiest parts of the season. She and her older son, Swanee, would work along with Burl and Grandpa in the field, and I would usually play horsey with Estes by crawling back and forth on my hands and knees while he rode my back. He was too big for me to carry any other way. One day when I was there taking care of Estes, Dr. Branch came by to see Grandma. He noticed that Estes wouldn't walk and asked if he could check him over. That's when they found out that he had rickets. Dr. Branch told them to start feeding him vitamin D. It wasn't long after that when he started walking. Estes was always short and fat. Even though he was extremely nervous, his mind was good and he learned pretty well in school. His grades were real good in high school and he was always nice to be around. Things like rickets and other nutritional diseases are diagnosed early now, but back then, the people up here in the mountains never bothered about taking their children to be checked for anything. No one was aware of the need for nutritious food, especially for babies and young children. The chapel women had done their best to teach the people, but so many of them never really understood. Most were so poor that even if they knew better, there was no way for them to make changes. Babies were fed whatever there was to eat, and the parents were grateful they had that. The diet for babies back then was finely mashed up pinto beans, cornbread, and milk and gravy. Sometimes they'd give them fatback meat to suck on as a pacifier. During apple season, most families would have stewed apples. We ate Aunt Winnie's canned apples all year round, but they didn't think of fruit as being especially good for a baby, so they never gave them any. All the babies did have the advantage of being breastfed. How long depended on what kind of work the mother had to do. If the mother worked close to the house, she might nurse until the child was 2 or 3 years old. But if she worked in the field, she would probably wean him early so she wouldn't have to come in to nurse. Whoever watched her baby while she worked would feed the baby gravy, bread, milk, and things like that. Most women were soon pregnant again after giving birth. Large families were common. I just don't know how they did it. There's a girl in our church right now who had 15 or 16 brothers and sisters. When her brother died last spring, there were still 11 of them living. 2 of Papa's sisters had twins. Aunt Mandy had 7 children, her last 2 being twins named Chester and Lester. Aunt Winnie only had 3 children. Her twins were Estes and Lestus. There was another girl out here, Lizzie Olson, who had twins named Estes and Lestus. I always thought it very strange that Mandy's Lester, Winnie's Lestus, and Lizzie's Lestus all died at birth or as newborn infants. Winnie died in 1945, and her sons, Swanee and Estes, were killed at the same time in a car accident when they hit a tree just outside Bridgeport in 1954. Estes was probably in his early 20s and Swanee in his late 20s. We never did know what caused the accident. They had just stopped by their Aunt Florrie's, and the next thing she heard was that they had been in an accident. Steer jumped off the mountain. When cannon time would come, Mama would send Maggie and me off for the whole day to play with the little ones, our cousins, and our younger sisters, so she and my aunts could work without them being under their feet. We would pack a box full of food to take with us and eat on that whenever we got hungry during the day. We would always take biscuits, tomatoes, salt, and a knife, and whatever leftovers there might be. Papa's watermelon patch was close to where we played, so we would usually go over there and try to pick the ripest and juiciest one in the whole patch. We really didn't know how to do that, but we would thump them and knock on them and sniff at their ends. That would probably have been a funny sight for someone passing by to see, all our little rear ends up in the air as we smelled the watermelons. Sometimes our neighbor, Gladys Knight, who was about Maggie's age, would come along and we would play school. Gladys always wanted to be the teacher, so the rest of us would be her students. When Burl came along, he and I would climb high up in a tree, and the branch would be our seat in school. Maggie didn't like to climb, so she would sit on a low branch or on the ground with the small children. We had a lot of good times playing like that. Children don't know how to play anymore. They would rather watch TV. It's sad. Sometimes if any of the older girls were around, they would all join in and play stink base with us, but they really didn't like to play the more active games like we did. Maggie didn't care much about playing anything outside, but Velma was a different story. She always wanted to play with us, but she was still little, and Desmer was only about 2 or 3 years old at that time. We didn't have many toys unless we made them ourselves. We always made our own bats out of a piece of board, and our balls out of old socks or rags that we twisted and wrapped cord and thread around. We would play for weeks with an old thread ball like that. None of my sisters or the other girls around here could bat a ball, so they just weren't of much use in a serious ball game. Burl and I were around each other a lot. We played together, and we had a lot of chores that we did together. One of those was gathering in wood. Mama liked to keep the land around the house clean, so we would pick up any fallen wood from the trees near the house first. Then we would go into the woods close by. The Turner boys, Leonard and Edward Lee, would sometimes bring one of their steers down, and we would take it with us and make it haul our wood. One time when we were near the peach orchard, that old steer got mad because we had tied a great big load of wood on him. He was a stubborn thing, and we could not get him to go in the direction we wanted him to go. There was a steep bank there, about as high as a house, and that dumb steer jumped right off that bank, wood and all. I thought for sure that fall had killed him. We took off running to find a place where we could get down the bank to where he was. Well, that old steer was just standing there on his knees, and we couldn't get him up for nothing. We ran home as fast as we could, yelling all the way. Mama came out to meet us, wondering what in the world we'd gotten into now. We led her back to the spot where the steer had jumped, and we all climbed back down the bank. When Mama got down there to that old steer, she took a hold of its tail and just twisted it this way and that way, back and forth. Wasn't no time at all before he jumped up. She kept a hold of his tail, and that old steer went wherever she wanted him to go. We couldn't believe our eyes. Certainly, for a fact, she had to have had some kind of magic power to make that steer get up and go ahead of us like it did. We didn't know then, and I didn't find out until years later when I was watching some men load cattle, that you could get those animals to go anywhere you wanted them to by twisting their tail back and forth. We'll stop right there for today. I can just imagine how impressed they were, Opal and Burl and the other two boys, with her mother. You don't often think of your mother being able to do things like that, so I'm sure that really, really impressed them. And I'm sure at first they did think, well, how did she know that magic trick? You know, you'd be thinking, gosh, mamas can do everything. So I love that part. That's how it ended. It Mama saved the day. Kind of crazy how this part started with Opal taking that serious. She was not going to let no boys in that house where they were playing. Miss Martson said not to, and she wasn't going to let them in. And she hit the boy in the face with the syrup bucket full of broken dishes, it said. So I imagine that was probably pretty painful, but she was going to keep her word. I guess she was determined. I enjoyed all the games that she talked about. I wonder what stink base. I've never heard that. You'll have to tell me if you know what that game is. I imagine it's some kind of like a tag, or not really hide and seek. I think she would have just said that, but somewhere where you had to run back to base, stink base. So I don't know. I hope you'll leave a comment if you know that and tell us what it is. And then she talked about, she would rather, the best thing that she wanted to do was ride bulls, ride the calves. I would have been terrified to do that. I wouldn't have wanted to do that. But Opal was, she was rough and tumble and tough, so that was her favorite thing. And then sometimes she said she'd play house. That would have been my favorite thing. I loved to play house. I had playhouses all around Granny's house. If it was raining, of course, I made them inside. And I really loved my baby dolls. Opal talked about her dolls, but I just adored my baby dolls. I had them all and knew their names, and really loved them. Katie and Corey could have cared less about dolls. I wanted them to like them like I did, but they never did. They liked their stuffed animals kind of like that, but they didn't like the dolls. I liked her talking so much of this is about kids playing outside. I was so fortunate that I got to grow up in a time when I was outside a lot. I think Katie and Corey's real fortunate that they grew up in a time where that was it. They played outside. Definitely all in the summer and the spring and the fall, but even sometimes in the cold, they just bundled up and went outside. So I think that's so good and gives kids an opportunity to use their imagination and, to do things like the swinging on the grapevines or building your own little house or whatever. I think it really gives them a confidence and teaches them about things too. So I'm glad about that. Interesting to hear her talk about her and Burl licking the birch tree, but also the chestnut logs that her daddy was working on, and then eating the little winter tea berry wintergreen that tasted like tea berries, she said. some kids, there might be some kids somewhere that still do that. Like I know when Katie and Corey was little, they still would do, like, think about the honeysuckles, getting the little nectar off the honeysuckles. Certainly chewing on sour grass or something like that. But there's so many kids today that don't know anything about that. And then you think about them licking that stuff. Well, it was because it had a taste, a different taste, sweet. Today, of course, we all live in the land of plenty, and kids can have anything they want. You know, it's just a sky, usually just by going and opening the cabinet door or the drawer or whatever it is. So you think that sounds kind of strange that Opal was really, her and Burl was so excited about that, but they didn't have many treats, so that was something different that they really looked forward to. Kind of reminds me of one time years ago, I asked Pap, I said, did you ever chew pine rosin like people say you could chew it for chewing gum? And he said, oh yeah, we did that all the time. And I said, well, was it good? And he said, well, it sure wasn't juicy fruit. So it's like he said, yeah, I did that when I was a kid, but once I could get a pack of juicy fruit, I wouldn't do that no more, you know. Anyway, so I liked her telling about that, though. And then the grapevine swinging, too. If you've never swung on a grapevine, it's very fun. We would do it when we were kids, and I was never really brave like the other ones around that were, Opal's right, you want to get where you can go out. Maybe one of the best places we ever found was over in the Coleman Gap. So there was an old logging road, and you could climb up on the top side of the road, and you could get on the grapevine, and then you were swinging over the road and then on over the steep side of the road. And that was probably the most fun, was up there. I was a chicken, though. I was never willing to go really drastically, but I did think it was fun. And Opal's right, sometimes they unravel on you, and then you end up falling. I always wanted to let somebody swing on it 3 or 4 times, and then I thought, well, it's not going to come undone on me. But it is big fun to swing on grapevines. And you may think, if you're not familiar with the grapevines like that I'm talking about, or Opal's talking about, you're thinking about like the ones that maybe you have in your yard, or the ones that are, you know, like at a vineyard or something like that. The grapevines we're talking about are wild grapevines. So they grow sometimes, you know, there might be one this big, like really they get big, and grow way up in the treetops. And those are wild grapes, possum grapes, fox grapes, different names in different places, but they're wild, and so they grow on long vines like that. And those that grow up in the treetops, typically the grapes are way up there, so you're not really going to really be able to get them. But as they grow, they send off shoots here and there, but then if you can find one of those big ones that, you know, it might be, you know, pretty big, and then you can hold on to it and swing like that. Interesting also how, which she's talked about this all through the book, and about the chores and how they had to go to Grandpa Corn's, this part she's talking about, and really work down there for him. And I'm sure that he shared in the, got a little bug on the camera. I'm sure she shared in her family shared in that corn that they helped him with. I'm sure they all did. I'm sure it was for all of them. But interesting to hear her talk about it, and her and Burl fighting. It's just the way of kids. Me and Paul argued like that over the silliest stuff, you know. And you don't even know why you're arguing sometimes. You just want to fuss. You just feel, like she said, for pure mischief. You just feel like that as kids, and you're just arguing with each other. I liked what Opal said, though, when he would give them a section of the field, and then she would do hers really fast so she could lay down and take a nap. I thought, she's just the best, isn't she? Opal's she's just the best. I would have loved to have known her. And then the Aunt Winnie story, it's really sad. Sad about her twins, and one of them dying, and then the other one being kind of nervous is what she called it. And then, of course, they didn't know until wonderful Dr. Branch, so glad he come by to see Grandma Corn and seen the little boy, that he had rickets. That was why he couldn't walk. And they were just thinking, well, it's because of the nervous condition and because she shot the gun. So I probably talked about this in some of my videos, but in Appalachia there's a real belief about marking the baby, it's called, so that if a woman's pregnant and something happens, it could mark the baby. Most often that's like, you know, something like while my mother was pregnant with me, she fell and hurt her ankle real bad and had to sit with it, up a long time the rest of the pregnancy or something. And then when I was born, I had a big blue place on my ankle and it's never went away. It's kind of like that. Or, a bird flew in the house and scared mother when she was pregnant with me, and then I have a birthmark on my back that's the shape of a bird. It's things like that, if you've ever heard of that, marking baby. I remember when I was pregnant with Katie and Corey, Matt's grandmother Laura died, and then my grandmother Gazzy died. They both died when I was pregnant. I didn't get to go to Laura's family or funeral. By then I was real big and pregnant, and Matt had to go by himself because I was on complete bed rest. I did go to my Granny Gazzy's, and I remember in the church, one of my uncles stopped me and said, "Don't go. I don't think you should go to the casket because you might mark the babies." He didn't want me to look on a deceased person, even though it was Granny. It was his mother. He didn't want me to do that. So that's just an old belief in the mountains of Appalachia. So that's why they all thought, well, that's why Estes is like that, is because she shot that gun and it scared him, and now he's scared of everything. So interesting. And sad, though, sad story. And then sad that, all the little twins that died, like she was saying, that was interesting. I think it's interesting that, well, that's interesting, but I think it's interesting that they lived close together and both named their twins Estes and Lestes. I wonder, that must have been popular names at that time or in that area. But both of the little Lestes died, both of them. And then the other one, Lester, his name was Lester. And then sad about the brothers dying in the car wreck together too. That's really sad, really sad. So this was an interesting part, kind of sad parts in there, but really interesting to hear how Opal, how she entertained herself, her and Burl and Maggie and Desmer and Velma and all the cousins and neighbor kids and all that. Even though it's a tremendously different time, a lot of it still reminds me of when I was a child with cousins and siblings and playing and having fun. And just when you were young, it seemed like the summer times just stretched forever, forever in front of you, all that playing. And then, of course, as you get older, it's like, man, where does the summer go? I just got out of school and I got to go back next week. Things seem to go faster the older you get. But I remember those days of playing like that, though, like Opal talks about. I especially liked I didn't write that down, but I thought it was really neat how her mother would send them with the younger ones and the cousins, and then all the aunts would be together, canning together, and then they canned it together, put it up together, but then split it all. It was for all of them. So that was really, really neat and really smart of the mothers, because they could get so much more done if, without kids under feet, especially the little bitty ones. So, and then those bigger ones was big enough to help. That was the thing about having those big families like that. The older ones could really help with the younger ones, help with the kids, and of course help with the chores. In those days, it took so much more work to keep a family afloat. So it come in handy for that too. I hope that you enjoyed this part. I hope you'll leave a comment and tell me what you liked, and I hope you'll drop back by next Friday and we'll see what Opal talks about next.